The key had been cut for a lock that no longer appeared on any map. That was the first fact Nora Calloway could confirm, and she confirmed it on a Tuesday morning in early March, sitting on the floor of a Wallace, Idaho bus station with a county assessor's map spread across her knees and a smell of diesel and old coffee soaking through the walls around her. She was 19 years old and had $38.70 in the pocket of her coat. The key was in the other pocket, not in a box, not in an envelope, not wrapped in anything at all. Just loose. The way you carry a thing you've been told means nothing. It was 3 inches long. Iron, not brass. The kind of iron that had gone the color of dried blood, the kind of rust that takes decades and particular moisture to achieve. Someone had stamped letters into the bow, the rounded grip at the top. But the oxidation had done its work, and she'd only been able to raise 2 of them with careful thumbnail pressure on the bus north from Boise. None a C and a partial 7, or possibly a T. She hadn't been certain which. She wasn't certain yet. What she knew, the key had belonged to her great-uncle Cresswell Bowman, who had died at 81 the previous November. What she knew, Cresswell had spent 31 years in the Silver Valley before returning to Boise to die in a house he did not own. What she knew, everyone at the reading of his will had laughed, or near enough to it. The particular restrained adult laugh that tries to hide itself and doesn't. What she did not yet know was the only thing that mattered. She folded the map along crease lines that had nearly worn through. Outside, the Bitterroot Range sat low under February cloud, the peaks still white, the valley floor brown with the specific dead grass exhaustion of early spring. Wallace smelled of cold mineral water. The runoff from the mountains carried something into the air here. Iron and sulfur, and something that wasn't quite either, a smell that made the back of your throat register it as a warning, and then slowly, over hours, as something close to familiar. Her cousin Renata Bowman was at that moment 212 miles south, finalizing paperwork on a property sale that could not legally be finalized until a claim was fully investigated. Nora knew this because she had read the documentation Renata's attorney had included in the certified letter sent to her apartment 3 weeks prior. The letter had been written to inform her the key had no monetary value and that her cooperation in signing a release of interest form would be appreciated. The attorney's name was Griff Hadley. She had not signed the release. She had, instead, bought a bus ticket to Wallace. The key sat in her pocket. She could feel its weight, not heavy, not light. Specific, the way objects are specific when they've been waiting for something. The will reading had taken place on the 14th of February, a date that had struck Nora as either cruelly ironic or simply indifferent, the way most important dates are indifferent to their own meaning. Renata Bowman had arrived first. She was 47, tall in the way that announces itself in doorways, wearing a cashmere coat in a deep charcoal gray that Nora would later learn cost $430. Her husband waited in the car, her attorney, Griff Hadley, compact, precise, the kind of man who made you feel your documents were already in the wrong order, sat beside her with a leather portfolio already open on his knee. Cresswell's estate was not large. His house had been rented for the last 11 years of his life. He owned no vehicle, no stocks, no savings account above $1,000.12. What he had was a storage unit in Garden City, the contents of which were assessed at approximately $240. These went to Renata, the furniture, the boxes, the old tools. To Nora he left a single sentence and a key. To my great-niece Nora, who was born asking questions no one could answer, I leave the key to what I found and could not tell anyone about until it was too late to matter, which it isn't. Renata's attorney had produced a brief smile, the kind of smile that is a tool. Renata herself had looked at Nora the way adults look at children who have received a gift that confirms what the adults already suspected about the situation. He was not well at the end, Renata said. Not to Nora exactly. To the room, the estate attorney placed the key on the table. It was sealed in a small envelope with Nora's name on it, in handwriting she recognized. Cresswell's, from the one birthday card he'd sent her, the year she turned 12, which contained $7 and a note that said, "Curiosity will serve you better than anything I could give you, but here is $7. She picked it up. It was heavier than she'd expected. "There's nothing to that," Renata said. "He was sentimental, he collected things. He always liked you because you reminded him of himself, and he was—" She paused. "He wasn't practical." Nora put the key in her coat pocket and looked at the table. She did not say. She had already spent 4 days researching the Coeur d'Alene mining district before she came to this meeting. She did not say. She had located 3 references to a C. Bowman in mining claim records from the 1930s, 2 of which connected to a property survey in Shoshone County. She did not say any of this because Renata Hadley and Griff Hadley were watching her the way people watch a lock they believe is already open. She said, "Thank you," and put on her coat. Wallace, Idaho does not look like a place that holds things. It looks like a place things left. The town sits in a gulch, literal mountains on 3 sides, close enough that standing at the main street intersection, you can see the tree line and feel the particular enclosure of a valley that was never meant to be settled, only mined. In the late 1800s, thousands of men had pushed into the Silver Valley because the rock here gave up silver and lead and zinc in quantities that rewrote property values overnight and destroyed men at the same rate. By the time Cresswell Bowman had arrived here in 1921, the first great mining era was ending. The valley was full of abandoned claims, half-surveyed properties, tunnels that had been started and never finished, and paperwork that had been filed, lost, refiled, lost again, and occasionally never found. Nora knew this because she had read about it on the bus. She also knew, and this was the piece that had made her buy the ticket rather than sign the release, that Shoshone County still held physical records from mining digital databases that predated the shift to state digital databases. Records that had never been scanned. Records that a person would have to look at in person. She arrived at the county assessor's office at 9:47 in the morning, 2 days after reaching Wallace. The walk was 11 minutes from the boarding house, where she was paying $31 a night for a room that smelled of pine cleaner and old radiator heat. The clerk was a woman named Beryl, 60-something, with the specific patience of someone who'd spent decades watching people come in looking for something they couldn't quite name. "See, Bowman," Beryl said, reading Nora's written request. "Mining claims. What decade?" 1920s through 1940s, Nora said. Beryl went back for a long time. When she returned, she set down a manila folder that was thicker than Nora had expected and thinner than Nora had hoped. "There are 3 filings under Cresswell G. Bowman," Beryl said. 2 were relinquished. 1, she opened the folder, appears to have never been formally relinquished. It's listed as inactive since 1944. Nora looked at the paper. She felt the key in her pocket without reaching for it. "For this era," Beryl said. "Not unusual. A lot of men left during the war and didn't come back to paperwork. Some claims just sat." Nora photographed every page. She walked back to her room in weather that had turned colder, the mountains producing a wind that came down the gulch in pulses. She laid the photographs on the bed in sequence and began reading. At the bottom of the 3rd page, a property survey filed in 1938 under the name of the claim, the Callaway Bowman Lateral, Extension C. There was a notation in handwriting that matched nothing on any other document. Small, careful, deliberate lock set at the gate. Original key with CB. She read it 3 times. She did not move for a moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket. The claim coordinates placed it in a drainage hollow 7 miles northeast of Wallace, accessible by a Forest Service road that Nora reached by borrowing a map from Beryl and renting a car from an agency on Bank Street for $37.50 a day. She drove out on a Thursday morning when the sky was doing something interesting. Not quite overcast, not quite clear, the light coming through at an angle that made the snow on the upper peaks look like a different material than snow. The road was unpaved after the 3rd mile and felt like it was arguing with the car. She drove slowly and smelled pine resin and cold creek water and something mineral underneath. The same throat register smell she'd noticed in town, but stronger here, closer to its source. The hollow was marked on the survey as approximately 40 yards wide at its mouth and narrowing into the slope. What she found was a tangle of second-growth timber and brush grown through what had once been cleared ground. She could see the ghost of it in the way the trees were younger and more uniform than those on the adjacent slope, the way young forest fills a cleared place. Near the back of the hollow, where the ground began to rise into the slope itself, there was a structure. It had been a timber-framed entrance housing, the kind built over a mine portal to keep weather out and equipment in. The timber had rotted almost entirely, but the frame's footprint was still visible in the soil, and the concrete pad that had supported it was still there, cracked by frost but present. Growing through the cracks was something that had once been a managed clearing, and was now grass and low brush asserting their own agenda. And behind the rotted frame, set directly into the rock face, an iron door, or what remained of one. The hinges had held. The door itself had swung closed at some point, and either been latched or rusted into position. She couldn't tell which, yet Anne was when left alone in a wet mountains and for its part, mountain valley for the better part of 80 years. And she stood in front of it for a moment. The cold came off the rock face with a different quality than the cold in the air, slower, stored, the cold of things that don't cycle with seasons. Below the door's center, at handle height, a keyhole plate, iron, matching the door exactly. The slot was partially obscured by rust and debris, but when she cleared it with the edge of the survey map, careful, not wanting to damage the mechanism if there was still one, she could see it was intact. She put the key in. It didn't turn. She stood there with her hand on the key for a moment, looking at nothing particular. Then she did what her great-uncle Cresswell had apparently forgotten to tell her in his will, which was that iron locks that have been set for 80 years require patience, not force. She worked the key back and forth in minute increments, applying only enough pressure to feel resistance rather than break it, working rust granules loose one microscopic layer at a time. The temperature of the iron transferred through her palm. She was there for 47 minutes, by her phone's count, before she felt the mechanism shift. The door opened inward with a sound she would later struggle to describe. Not the groan of rust exactly, but something below that, a sound that had been compressed and was now expanding back to its original shape. The interior smelled of earth and mineral water and time measured in decades. She used her phone's light. The tunnel ran approximately 30 feet into the slope before opening into a chamber. Roughly oval, timber-shored, the timbers still standing, which told her something about how dry the interior had remained. On the left wall, wooden shelving had been built into the rock, and on the shelving sat what she initially processed as equipment cases, flat wooden boxes latched, the kind used for instrument storage or specimen transport. She opened the nearest one. Inside, packed in what had once been sawdust and was now compressed into something close to a dried cake, were stones. Rough, irregular, ranging from the size of a grape to the size of a small plum. She held one up to her phone light, octahedral habit, adamantine luster, the specific way light moved through a stone that had carbon atoms at a particular moment in Hoodler moment geologic time. She counted 7 boxes on the left shelf. She opened 3 more and confirmed what she'd suspected from the first one. Then she sat on the floor of the chamber and read, by phone light in a mine tunnel in the Bitterroot foothills, the document she found folded under the lid of the 4th box. It was dated the 19th of September, 1944, and it was written by Cresswell Bowman to a person he called, "Whoever finds this and is mine," which was a strange and specific form of address that she would understand later when she understood the rest. He had found the pipe, a kimberlite intrusion, not large, not by global standards, but specific and real and not logged in any official survey, because he had understood within 6 months of finding it exactly what would happen to the claim if he filed it openly. He had instead filed a lateral claim under a surveyor friend's secondary notation and never activated it publicly. He had sealed what he'd extracted into the boxes and locked the gate. He had taken the key. He had come back once, in 1948, and confirmed the boxes were still there. He had not gone back again because he had not known what to do with it. The claim was real but unregistered in a way that complicated everything. The diamonds were real but unsellable without provoking the exact questions he didn't want asked, and by the time he understood he was dying, there was only one person he trusted to figure out what he could not. The last line of the letter read, "The key fits one lock. If you are reading this, you already know that. Don't sign anything they ask you to sign." She had been back in Wallace for 36 hours when Griff Hadley arrived. She didn't know, at first, how he'd known where she was. Then she remembered the release of interest form he'd asked her to sign had, in its 2nd paragraph, requested her cooperation in providing her current address for legal correspondence. She had, in the process of returning the unsigned form, written her Wallace boarding house on the envelope's return address. She had done that deliberately. She had wanted to see who came. Hadley sat across from her in the boarding house's small common room, which smelled of coffee and someone's earlier breakfast, toast and something sweet. He had driven from Boise. He was immaculate despite the drive. He set a leather portfolio on the table between them with the deliberate placement of someone who considers every physical gesture a form of argument. "You found the mine site," he said. Not a question. "I found a property described in a mining claim," she said. "Nora." He said her name with the very specific gentleness adults use when they are about to tell you something they expect you to be too young to contest. "There's a complication I need you to understand." He opened the portfolio and laid a document in front of her. It was a deed of assignment, dated 1947, signed by Cresswell Bowman, assigning any and all interest in the Callaway Bowman Lateral to a holding company called Nova Properties LLC. The signature matched Cresswell's handwriting with a precision that suggested either authenticity or excellent forgery. "Under Idaho property law," Hadley said, "an unregistered claim that has been assigned by the original claimant reverts to the assignee upon discovery of value. The estate's will is superseded by the prior assignment." He waited for her to react. She looked at the document. She turned it over. She turned it back. "Can I photograph this?" she asked. He paused one fraction of a second too long before saying, "Of course." She photographed both sides. She set her phone down on the table. "When does Renata need an answer?" she asked. "The end of the week would allow us to move forward without further." Evening, alone in her room. That evening, alone in her room, she read the document again. And then she read it a 3rd time, the way she'd been reading things since she was old enough to understand that what documents said and what they meant were not always the same distance apart. Then she found it. The assignment document was dated the 19th of May, 1947. The mining claim itself, the Callaway Bowman Lateral, extension C, had been filed with its notice of extension on the 23rd of August, 1947. An assignment cannot precede the filing of the thing it assigns. This is not a technicality. Under Idaho mining law as codified in 1931 and still operative during the relevant period, a claim assignment executed before the claim's formal notice of extension was legally void against third parties, meaning the extension was not bound by it. Nova Properties had been assigned the base claim, not the extension. The extension, containing the tunnel, the chamber, and everything in it, had never been validly transferred. She had not known this before she photographed the document. She had known it was worth reading carefully. She was standing in the Shoshone County Recorder's office at 9:03 the following Monday morning when the clerk confirmed, after 22 minutes with the physical records, that the Extension C filing had never been assigned, never been transferred, never been relinquished. By 11:15, she had the name of a Wallace attorney, Vera Okafor, who had specialized in mining claim disputes for 24 years and had a particular expression. Nora would learn for situations where someone had made a large mistake in front of a documented paper trail. "They showed you this," Vera Okafor said, holding the photograph of the deed of assignment. "They left me a copy," Nora said. Vera Okafor set the photograph down and looked at Nora with the evaluating attention of someone recalibrating a prior assumption. Nora was used to this. She sat with it calmly. "He thought the extension date would be the same as the base claim date," Vera said. "It wasn't a question." She meant Hadley. "He thought you wouldn't look." "He thought I was 19, Nora said. "You are 19. "Yes," Nora said. "I know." The filing was completed that afternoon. Vera Okafor contacted the Idaho Department of Lands, the county recorder's office, and, through channels that moved considerably faster than Nora had anticipated, a federal minerals survey office that had, it turned out, an existing flag on the Callaway-Bowman claim area related to an unresolved survey discrepancy from 1951. They also contacted the Idaho State Bar's Ethics Review Office regarding a document presented in a legal negotiation that appeared to represent a claim interest that did not, in fact, exist. Griff Hadley called her twice that week. She did not answer either time because Vera Okafor had asked her not to, and she understood why. The last call she received that week was from Renata Bowman directly, not through the attorney. On a Thursday evening, in a tone Nora had never heard from her cousin before. It was not anger exactly. It was the particular register of someone who has been certain for a long time and has just understood what their certainty cost them. "You never said anything," Renata said, "at the reading. You knew." Nora thought of the assessor's records she'd already researched before the will was read. She thought of Cresswell's birthday card. "Curiosity will serve you better than anything I could give you." "I didn't know," she said. "I suspected. There's a difference. You could have." Renata stopped. "You just sat there." "You told me he wasn't practical," Nora said. "I was listening." She ended the call and went to the window of her boarding house room. The mountains were doing something with the late light that made the snow look almost warm. She had $38.70 less $31 a night for some number of nights, plus a rental car she needed to return, plus Vera Okafor's retainer, which she had agreed to pay from the proceeds of the claim settlement when it came. She put the key on the windowsill. It sat there in the last of the evening light, still the color of dried blood, still the same weight it had always been. The legal process took 11 months. The Extension C claim was formally registered in Nora's name as heir to Cresswell G. Bowman's estate under the corrected intestate provisions, confirmed by the Shoshone County Probate Court on the basis of Vera Okafor's filing and the documentary record. The Kimberlite Pipe assessment, conducted by a geological survey firm from Spokane, confirmed a viable, though not vast, deposit. the kind of find that mattered to the right buyers. And there were right buyers, and Vera Okafor knew who they were. The rough diamonds from the 7 boxes, 87 stones, assessed by a certified gemologist whose report took 3 weeks and ran to 22 pages, were valued collectively at approximately $1,460,000. The geological rights to the remaining deposit were negotiated separately. Nora took a sum she had not imagined at 19 and did not discuss publicly at any age. Griff Hadley faced an ethics review before the Idaho State Bar that concluded with a formal censure and a suspension of his license to practice for 14 months. The document he had presented, the deed of assignment, was found to have been prepared by Hadley himself, using a signature traced from an authenticated letter in Renata Bowman's possession. Renata Bowman was named in the investigation as having provided the source document. She was not criminally charged. The civil suit that followed resulted in a settlement that, per Vera Okafor's advice, Nora accepted and did not publicize. Renata's charcoal cashmere coat appeared in the background of exactly one more photograph, taken at a property sale in Boise, that did not cover what it was meant to cover. Nora enrolled the following autumn in the geology program at the University of Idaho. She drove up from the valley twice during her first semester to walk the hollow where the mine sat. Not to see the mine, particularly, but to walk through what had been cleared ground and was now young forest, to understand how long it takes a landscape to reclaim something and how long it takes a person to understand what they've been left. She kept the key, not on her keychain. It was too large for that and too heavy. She kept it on her desk, the way you keep a thing that reminds you of something true. That most locked things are only locked because the people who could open them believed they couldn't. Cresswell Bowman had known who she was. He had simply been waiting for her to be old enough for it to matter. She was not old when it mattered. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more hidden fortune and inheritance stories. Thanks for watching.